I love coffee. But one thing I've never tried in all my years of drinking coffee is trying to find the perfect balance between that cup that gets me up, gets me the energy I need to kind of get through things, and taking one too many where I'm a little bit jittery, my heart starts to race, and I'm sort of feeling the negative consequences of taking too much caffeine. Although I've never explored what my personal ideal caffeine dosage is, the protagonists in the film Another Round try to do that exact same thing with regard to alcohol. So this Danish film came out in 2010. It's sort of a mixture between drama and comedy and centers on four middle-aged men, Martin, Nicolaj, Peter, and Tommy, who are all going sort of through a midlife crisis. They all are friends with each other through the fact that they work at the same high school together. And they're out one night for Peter's birthday, having some drinks and some appetizers, and sort of open up about how their personal lives aren't going too well, their life at school is not going too well. And it's sort of like this depressing mood that starts the film, but then they get onto this quote from a Danish philosopher who believed, supposedly, that people were born with a blood alcohol content of 0.05% too low at birth. What started as a joke almost about potentially trying to take one or two drinks throughout the day to be more social and more engaged with their lives actually ends up becoming a science for these guys as they try to stay just tipsy enough that they're more social, more engaged, and sort of get the benefits of alcohol, but then they also do not want to drink too much. As you can probably imagine, this plan sort of starts out well, but quickly spirals out of control. We first initially see some benefits within the characters' lives, as Martin in particular is giving far more engaging history lectures than he did before, and his life with his wife and kids have never been better. Nicolaj comes home drunk in front of his wife and kids and is kicked out, and Martin ends up actually fighting with his wife over his change in personality and ends up discovering her infidelity. In the closing scenes of the film, Tommy takes his own life. He goes out on a boat with his dog and never returns, and we're left with the scene at the harbor in a sort of hopeful manner where Martin ends up ultimately, hopefully, being able to reconcile things with his wife. The students end up passing their exam, and there's this sort of lukewarm celebration on the same sort of area where Tommy took his own life due to alcohol, but then the students are celebrating with bottles of champagne, and Martin breaks out his dance moves. There's a lot to analyze with Another Round, starting with how it portrays alcohol, the substance. So the film in the very beginning, where it shows this drinking game that all of the students in Denmark play from a very young age, where they sort of do a race around the lake and try to drink as much as they can without throwing up, sort of shows how alcohol has a sort of dual role, both as a central part of Danish culture, while also sort of being this sort of vice that, if taken too much, can obviously lead to dependency, addiction, all these sorts of negative side effects. So the lens isn't particularly saying that the substance is purely bad or purely good, but sort of how it's used contextually and how ultimately the user relates to the substance over time. By choosing to show four middle-aged men of fairly high social status who are sort of well off and not really the types of people who you think would be alcoholics or those that would suffer from addiction, he sort of subverts the narrative that society traditionally paints of people suffering from addiction as only those with potentially mental health issues, those that are already sort of economically disadvantaged, or sort of already sort of suffering in some other way. Throughout the film, Vinterberg pays special attention to what we as the viewers hear before the characters in the film consume alcohol, from the sound of ice hitting the glass to the glass hitting the table, and eventually alcohol being poured into the glass. The use of enhanced sounds and close-up shots sort of anticipate the consumption of alcohol before it actually happens. And this Vinterberg does deliberately to kind of show, to mirror the neurobiology of addiction, where often the initial spike in dopamine occurs before the actual substance is consumed, when the behavior, the sound, the feeling, or the trigger happens where the body anticipates that this substance is going to be consumed into the body, and we have like this sort of peak of dopamine, and then this leveling off that creates the craving withdrawal. I'm just going to show you a couple quick examples of how this is seen throughout the film.
I vodka. Hold da kæft, det der er vist en halv promille, vi ryger over der. Tommy? Ja? Varmt så.
So the harbor is where the film concludes. It's where Tommy chooses to take his life, and it's ultimately where Martin, Peter, and Nikolaj celebrate the students in their class getting high marks in their exams and ultimately passing to go on to college. When we have this scene, we see Martin looking off into the distance where one of his closest friends died, but then looking back towards the shore to see his students celebrating with alcohol. And we're sort of left with the central conflict as a viewer. Is alcohol good? Is it bad? Is sort of a frame for viewing life as a whole in terms of like it being such a central aspect to the culture that it can be considered neither good nor bad. And Martin ultimately chooses to indulge in this sort of celebration, the celebration of life, that despite all this hardship, he's ultimately going to choose to stay optimistic. And that for him is to also participate in the fact that alcohol is a central part of his life. Overall, I really enjoyed watching the film another round. Mads Mikkelsen's performance in particular as Martin is a very raw, brutal, and just honest portrayal of what it looks like to struggle with the substance and sorts of different mental health and personal issues as well. Thomas Vinterberg does a great job of sort of tying in different genres together. And overall, the film feels like just like a very truthful look at this common issue that impacts society, but also gives like a sort of unique view, especially for an international audience, about how the topic looks in Denmark. My grade for the film would be an A+, the highest I could possibly give it. I truly loved it, loved rewatching it, and that's about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around in class.